Hi, guys. Welcome back. We're going to be talking about vows today.
Yeah. And not the religious vows, but vows that actually we think are protecting us, and they're not. These vows that protect wounds. We're sticking with our podcast series, exploring the different points of awareness for the unique battle pillar that we explore in our Academy. Check it out, Academy Plus. And we're going to be getting into the lies that the enemy sows in us to even like short circuit our exploration of these things. Growing awareness of these things. Awareness. Growing awareness of these things actually leads to great freedom, which is why we have it as a point of awareness in our unique battle pillar.
Yes.
Did I say it all?
We made up so many words in this podcast. So awareness is one of them, and there's plenty more. So you
add
should
to the list.
Even if you don't want to learn about vows, you should just come and join us to find out all of our new words.
Yeah, make it a drinking game.
Yes. Drinking coffee or alcohol.
See you in there.
Hello.
Hey, little Forrest Gump wave there. Welcome back to the Catholic Coaching Podcast. We're continuing on talking. Yeah.
That's a Forrest Gump.
Oh, that's Forrest Gump?
Wave.
Well, no, yeah, when he's got the towel in the locker room and he just kind of goes.
Oh.
It's a couple of fun waves there. Anyways, waves to you, Forrest Gump, great movie. Today we're talking about vows, continuing on with our points of awareness on the unique battle pillar that we've got. And again, drawn heavily from some of the insights that Dr. Bob Schutz and the JP2 Institute for Healing provides, and the Restore the Glory podcast. And yeah. What do we got on vows? Why did we pick vows, Erin?
So vows, I guess.
Maybe we define vows. You want
Yeah. In tradition, a vow, actually the definition of a vow is a solemn promise. This also is like added. There's a little bit more added to it in the biblical sense, but a vow is a solemn promise made to God to perform or to abstain from performing a certain thing. Mm-hmm. Okay. I looked it up, even what does a vow mean in like the Catholic faith? And they're talking about we take vows for marriage and
holy orders,
religious
orders. Yep.
And an interesting thing that it said, I mean, they stick to a vow is a solemn promise made to God, but a vow presupposes a full consent of the will.
Interesting.
Yes.
Wow.
Right. One does not give unless one knows fully what one is doing.
Got it.
So, okay. So that is kind of the traditional definition of what a vow is. Mm-hmm. When we talk about vows, these are vows that we make not to God, and sometimes we make them unconsciously, but we make them to protect our wounds, to protect even the belief systems around our wounds. And we actually aren't making them to God. We're making them to ourselves.
Yes.
And we're kind of making ourselves God in that way.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. And so again, why this as a point of awareness in our unique battle pillar? Well, the unique battle pillar helps to answer the question, what is getting in the way? All right. What's getting in the way of us becoming fully who we are in our unique design, but also what's getting in the way of us fully stepping into our unique mission and purpose. All right. So these vows are certainly these, I don't want to say covenants. That's a little bit grander and involves blood.
Yeah.
Right? But there's a promise that we've made here.
Yes.
And what happens is we're going to get into some examples of these vows. When we come to understand what they are, we can see how they actually prevent us from entering into a deeper relationship with our Lord.
Yeah.
And actually keep us from growing, right? They keep us, there's almost like a stagnation point here. Yeah. I remember for me personally, one of the vows that I had after I'd gone into infantry officer course and I was exposed to these what I saw as amazing leaders, that I didn't see any flaws in them. I thought that I needed to be just as perfect, and I knew I was not. And so the vow that I made was, I'm not going to let my Marines see my weakness. I'm not going to let them see my imperfection. And guys, what that vow led to was hiding. I like to say I put the office in officership, and I really avoided them. And it wasn't until I was overseas and I was in an environment where like everybody sees everybody's stuff when you're like living in that close quarters and going through those experiences. And I started to kind of break down those walls, allow myself to be seen. And it's just like, oh, okay, this is actually this is a good thing. Like even revealing some of my flaws.
Yeah. Yeah. I think back when I was like dating, and I don't even know if I ever really dated anyone. Like, I never really officially dated anyone until you, I think.
I like that.
But I had like a lot of flings here and there. And I think partially because of this vow that I had. You know, when I was younger, I just fell hard for guys, and I was just like in love with them.
Good go.
Yeah. And
Patrick Swayze poster on the wall.
I was hurt like a couple of times by men. Boys. I was really young.
Who are they? They're dead.
No, well, it led me to you, so it's really actually not a big deal. But one of my vows was like, I'll never be hurt again. And I think actually that was the reason why I never dated again, is because it was operating out of that vow.
Yeah, it's interesting. These vows, folks, which again, they seek to be protective of us, guarding us from feeling some sort of emotion that we don't want to feel, whether it's shame or hurt or embarrassment, something like that.
Or it's protecting the wound.
Yeah, it's protecting
those areas of woundedness.
And a lot of times I think they're also protecting relationships too. Like here, it was like, I'm not going to let them see that I'm wounded, or I'm not going to let them see that I'm imperfect, because that is what's going to guard our, platoon commander and, sergeant relationship that we had here. And it actually was the opposite.
Yeah.
It really was. It was an obstacle to real relationship, which is what happens with vows.
It pretends to protect.
Yeah.
It actually doesn't protect.
Right.
It pretends to protect. And it's these particular vows that we're talking about, not the ones that we take when we're standing up on the altar or in holy orders. It's the vows that we make
in fear.
But also like as if we are God, as if we are the ones that need to be protecting us.
Yeah.
And we're kind of putting ourselves into that position of God. It is a bit of a usurpation.
Yeah. Yep.
Here.
Yep. So some of the symptoms that you see showing up here that are kind of the consequence of having these vows, again, they actually attack our relationships, even though we think that they're protecting our relationships. And so you might start to see just some, frustration in your relationships. You hurt other people inadvertently. Like, you don't mean to hurt other people, but next thing you know, you're reacting and you're hurting other people. Mm-hmm. Okay. There could be something that's under there that's worth exploring a little bit. We find ourselves isolating in these vows. We isolate from God. Like Aaron was saying, it kind of goes this path of, I'm going to protect myself, right? That's what we think vows do. We think they're protecting our ways of protecting ourselves. So that brings us to an isolation from God, but also an isolation from other people, especially when we think that other people are the source of our pain.
Yeah.
And therefore, the way that we guard ourselves from further pain is to isolate ourselves from other people.
Well, it also, I'm doing air quotes, protects the wound, but it really just blocks the wound from ever being healed.
Yeah. And I think it leads to
protects.
It doesn't protect. Yeah. Yes. It leads to a place, Aaron, you talk about this a lot, like this emotional exhaustion too, right?
Yeah.
So if you find yourself constantly being exhausted emotionally, especially when you're around certain people, it might be that you're really investing a lot of your emotional energy, even on a subconscious level, to upholding this vow that you have.
The solemn promise.
Yeah.
That. And so how can the enemy use this? I mean, he loves anything but moderation, anything but God. Those are some of the rules that the enemy uses. And so it's like, I mean, when we are acting as our own God and protecting ourselves and really blocking true relationship, true thriving, true authenticity, true healing and restoration, like that's his playground. He's going to love that. And here's the thing too, guys, wounds are usually beliefs. They're what we would call pretend to be protective beliefs, or solution beliefs. They are beliefs. And that's kind of what we talk about. And the enemy uses false beliefs. And I think the way that we kind of fall into this vow trap is really, it's that lie. This is protective. This is useful. This is going to make you strong,
So I know that, and I love how Dr. Bob and Dr. Jake Kim, they go into the 7 the 7 wounds.
Yeah.
Right. In their Restore the Glory podcast. And they have a whole like anatomy of the wound series on this that we're drawing from that quite a bit, but go check that out. Restore the Glory. Amazing podcast here. And, for me, I have that vow, they're never going to see my flaws. That was really surrounding this wound of rejection.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. There's a real kind of like, I don't want to be, I don't want to be rejected by them. Cause that was just like, oh man, just to feel that feeling of rejection was, I mean, you're just so alone. Like that's the other piece. Like, I don't want to be alone.
Yeah. Well,
So
that's abandonment. So like mine is also, I know this one comes up a lot. It's just like, fine, I'll just do it by myself. And that's protecting that wound of abandonment.
Yes.
And guys, just so you know, Matt and I have not had this completely figured out. These things are still coming up. We're the Lord is revealing these vows and these wounds to us. And if you didn't listen to last week's podcast, we talk about that. We talk about how it is a process and that we can't really rush through this. And this is the wooing. The wooing journey that the Lord is bringing us on. All of this is Him wooing us into a deeper relationship.
Yeah. So if you want to actually get to the source of things, right? Source of your activation or your triggeredness or your discomfort or the lack of peace or your anxiety, if you want to really get to the source of those things, stick around here, all right? Because when you start to grow an awareness of those vows, those areas where you have chosen a path of self-protection that's keeping you from being gathered under the wing of the Lord and like just being brought closer. Like Israel, like I long to bring you under my wing like a mother does to her chicks. It keeps us from putting ourselves under the real source of protection, which is the Lord. Okay, so if that's something you want, stick around here. If you want to really feel that freedom because you're getting to the source of things, you're pulling back that top layer of the onion so that you can actually get to the wound where you invite the Lord in there, and then it's transformed from a place of isolation to a place of deep intimacy, right? That's amazing. And that changes us from inside out. Like we become new people. We don't have to consciously think about becoming good. It just overflows from us because it's overflowing from an intimate relationship with our Lord in that place where we felt perhaps most unloved. And if you just want to be unburdened from some of those, you want to unburden some of those protector parts about you, to kind of even bring in a little bit of the parts language here. Because oftentimes those vows can be associated with these protector parts that we see. And so if you want to start to unburden those people where it's just like, hey, there's a protector part of me that thinks I need to be perfect in order to be loved. It's like, okay, that poor protector is burdened by something that he can't handle. So how can we bring the Lord in to really just show mercy, even those parts of us that haven't experienced the easy yoke of Christ yet?
Yep.
Cool.
All right, let's go. Let's do it.
All
Okay,
right.
so like everything else that we're doing in this series, the enemy's strategy are always lies, and they're always lies that even keep us from looking at these points of awareness, from even starting to walk towards that journey or walk into that journey with the Lord and into self-awareness.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah.
So the first lie that the enemy uses, and we kind of spoke about this a little bit so far, but your vows are actually protecting you. And maybe it's not your vows, but this particular vow is actually protecting you. So like, for instance, I'll never get hurt again. That felt like it was really protecting me. Like it was protecting me from future wounds. It wasn't even just protecting me from past wounds, but like future. Like I'm never going to get hurt again. And the truth was, if we were to follow that trajectory of that vow that I had, I'm like, this feels really protective. I'm never going to get hurt again. The emotion that created was hesitation, was caution, was fear. Really, it was like some derivative of fear. And then what was interesting was, yes, I never got hurt again, but I never loved again. I never allowed myself to love. And I was like kind of hurting other people. I wasn't really fully honest. I wasn't really being fully authentic. I, out of my own self-protection, was, like kind of being like, I like you, but I don't like you. And like, so I just wasn't like kind to people.
Yeah, it almost sounds like
I was hurtful. It was the fruit.
like a fear-based attachment style. where it's kind of like
avoidance.
Come close, but not too. Yeah, like avoidance, one of those.
Yeah.
But like specifically fear based, where it's just like, okay, I want you close, but not too close. It's kind of like a pull in, push away kind of thing, where you never. It's very kind of manic in the way that it goes back and forth, or polaristic.
Yeah,
polaristic.
But I don't know. Is that a word? Yes.
It is today.
Today it is.
Hey, word
of the day. So like Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Okay. All right, some levity, and otherwise not so levity. Okay. So yeah, you're.
So the interesting thing that happened was it wasn't that it was not protective, but it was also like it was actually creating the very thing I was trying to avoid to create.
Yes.
You know, like it was like I was like, I will never be hurt again. And it was like actually creating more hurt in that I never experienced love in that way. Yeah. Right. So it was more wounding based off of what Bob Schuss was saying, what wounding is. It's like, it's not just like an actual imposition of pain, but also a lack of something that you need.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So it's like keeping you from actually receiving the thing, and then the thing, that love that you desire, and that lack of love further causes more wounding. I
was hurting myself. Oh my God. Wounding.
I'm still on Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Okay.
Yeah, it's that lack of love that you're now creating those conditions. It's not like it's being withheld from you, but the thought is I don't have it, which means it's being withheld from me. It's like no. You're actually putting a barrier in place.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
So I was like, I wasn't protecting anything. I was actually creating the very thing I was trying to avoid.
Yes. Yeah. I think specifically even so counterinsurgency warfare. All right. So in counterinsurgency environment, you are really seeking to win over the will of the people, right? I mean, any warfare, but like in a counterinsurgency specifically, you're not going force on force. And so we really had to befriend the people in these towns that we were around. And that meant making ourselves vulnerable. It meant removing our helmet, our protective gear, leaving our weapons behind, sitting down and like breaking bread with these people and having conversations. And yeah, there's ways of managing those risks that were there, but we needed to be with the people, in relationship with people. And that's actually where in a counter, like that's textbook how you have the greatest success. Now, what makes that hard is we have this part of us that just says, yeah, I want that, but I want to be safe. And so safety, like being inside of my huge armored vehicle feels safe. Being behind my sunglasses feels safe. Being, attached to my weapon feels very safe. Having my nice little outposts like outside of the town feels very safe. But ultimately, it's not creating any sort of relationship, which is actually where, like the case studies showed, these are when people were most successful in a counterinsurgency environment, when they were actually lowering their defenses to make room for an actual relationship. And things would happen where, because of that, you'd have locals that would be like, hey, don't go down that way because that's where the enemy's laid in a bunch of mines. Or, hey, heads up, we just had this, chatter come over the radio, and careful over here. Why? Because now we're in relationship with these people, and there's a loving relationship, and it really is the way that love is meant to go. But if we tried to just button up, right, and keep ourselves safe, like first of all, a lot of the times that's actually where we become most vulnerable, because nobody gives us the warnings then of when the minefield is being laid around the corner. But also we're not accomplishing our mission here as well. So safety also pulls us away from the demands of the mission that God has put us on. It's like, hey, I want the glory, but not the cross, is what it says.
I wish somebody had asked me, hey, would you rather be safe or experience love? Mm-hmm. And just like kind of make it that simple for me and be like, oh, but also it's like not even real safety. Would you rather feel safe? I'm doing air quotes. Or experience love, like either. That I don't want to put them like across one another, like they're opposing, because actually real love is security, it's safety.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like that's what I was sacrificing. It was like real love.
It's a counterfeit.
Yeah.
A counterfeit safety that
Right.
you've got. Yeah. So the illusion.
So what do we do? Like, what's a counter strategy here? Because I think it's like, first identify maybe areas that you've been wounded in. Mm-hmm. I think maybe those are the easiest ways to start.
Sure, yeah. I mean,
And
if
then,
the vow's not even guarding you from seeing that
Yes.
protector part is like got that banished exile, buttoned up in the cave.
right. But like, okay, so we identify an area where we've been wounded, and then to identify your vows is to say like, okay, what am I saying about this? Like, finish this statement. It's usually something like, I will never, or I will always. Mm-hmm. Something like that. Because if you think about a solemn promise, that's like that's the actual definition of a vow. It's like a solemn promise made to God to perform or abstain from performing a certain thing. So I will never, or I will always, like, blah. Like, what are you saying about that part that feels protective to you? Mm-hmm. That's how you start to identify a vow. And then when you identify the vow, renounce it. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say just like renounce it and it goes away, because I do think there is a lot of work that needs to happen. Not a lot. I don't want to say it's too much, but like that there is some mindset work around it, because if we're just renouncing it, and we can do, please do that in the name of Jesus, because if that vow is from the enemy, it will loosen its grip. Mm-hmm. But if you haven't taken care of the actual lie, it will come right back in. Like it's like the demon that leaves the house and comes back with 7 others.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it's just going to come right back in. There's like a high recidivism rate.
Yeah.
For
So
that.
when you start to kind of lean into these vows and identify them, I mean, don't just renounce and then move on. That's not doing the work. Like, it's renounce and then kind of get a little curious. Like, this is where I love how parts work can kind of facilitate this dialogue with this part of you that really feels safe or feels like it's accomplishing its duty to protect you with this vow, and being able to kind of, what we say, bring it through the reason cycle, have like a conversation where we're looking at all the evidence, where it's just like, yes, I know that you see this as protective, but this is a consequence that you're ignoring that's happening over here that's causing more pain. And I know that's not what you intend to do. I know, and I love you for wanting to protect me. And there's a way that we can go about doing this that doesn't cause these negative consequences over here.
I'm going to add to that too, because I think it could be a little more simple than that.
All right.
One of my questions that I love asking people when I'm coaching them is this protective in any way? Mm-hmm. This thought, is this protective in any way? And I've come to start to realize which ones are vows, so I can ask those questions. But then I ask, how is it pretending to be protective? Mm-hmm. It's not like actually protecting. Like, how is the opposite true? Like, how is it actually not protective?
Yeah.
And then, like, it might break your brain for a second, but allow it to go there, because when you start to see the other side of it, when you start to see the implications of you hanging on to this vow and realizing how it's actually not protective and actually creating the thing that you're trying to avoid, then now we can kind of get a little bit of groundwork. I think that's like a really simple way of dealing with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's bringing all things to reason. If there's a part of us that thinks this vow is accomplishing this protection, but by the fruits you will know them, we can look downstream of that thought and see what actually happens, whether we're showing up defensively or angry and we're yelling at people or hurting other people. That is not from God.
Yep.
And God wants to deliver us of those things. And in order to kind of say, yes, I'm going to let go of this thing that feels very protective, there needs to be something else that we can ground our protection in, like our true safety in.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, folks, I can't see a way around this other than by at some point bringing it to fulfillment and resting in the Lord. Like, it's our true source of protection. I think of I can't remember which psalm, but it often comes up in night prayer, where it's, I pretty much I lay down and I immediately fall asleep, because I know that like I have nothing to fear. Like that kind of protection where it's just like, not because I got extra strong locks on my door or because I've got a new security dog or cameras and things like that. But like I rest, I sleep at night knowing, Lord, that you are, my safety is in you.
Yeah.
You're my watchman. Unless the Lord is on the watchtower, the watchers watch in vain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it does show when we kind of are quick to protect ourselves, it shows, I guess, gaps of trust.
Yeah.
In specific areas.
Yeah.
It's not gaps of trust all the time in every area of your life. It's usually just like really specific areas, you know? Mm-hmm. I know when it comes to sickness, I have gaps of trust with the Lord. I know that.
See, I'm cool with it.
Right.
When it comes to finance, though.
And I'm cool with that, right? So like there's different... I just have we have different gaps of trust.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's okay because the Lord wants to come into those places. So, okay, second lie.
Let's do it.
Moving on, the enemy strategy. This is the lie. These vows actually make me strong.
Interesting.
What was your vow again?
It was with my Marines, they'll never see my imperfection.
Do you think that's one of those that makes you strong?
Yeah, because it was this thought where it's like, okay, my strength as a leader was grounded in their perception, which is just all like when we go into like locus of control, we can see it's just like, man, I just spent a lot of time managing other people's perceptions, and the primary way I did that was hiding from them so they wouldn't see them, and like talking accolades and bravado and like because I said so, that kind of stuff. So like that was something I thought was making me strong. I think the classic one we can draw from Scripture, though, is St. Peter when Christ goes to wash his feet. And what does he say? You will never wash my feet.
Yeah.
Sounds like a little vow, right? You will never. There's that language. Never. You will never wash my feet. And Christ responds and says, hey, if I don't wash your feet, you have no part in me. Yeah. So it's like, again, we have these extreme vows that we think are going to kind of protect the relationship. Like, Lord, like, I'm not going to let you stoop down to this level. But then the Lord is just like, hey, if you want to go this way, just know that like we can't have this relationship. You can't have any part in me.
Yeah.
That's where you don't get what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, I think the previous ones that are like this seems protective, those are driven by fear. Mm-hmm. And then these are kind of driven by pride.
Pride. Yeah.
I call these pretty vows because they seem helpful. They seem like really useful, like,
and even virtuous.
Like, right, like I could see somebody using even just like the vow, and I'm not saying this is across the board for everybody, but like a vow that sounds something like, I'll always find a way, you know? And if that particular thought leads you to isolating yourself and not going to the Lord and not finding a way through him who is the way, you know, then yeah, okay, maybe that is a vow. Maybe that's not a helpful vow, but it seems good. It seems like a pretty positive, you know, commitment of the will. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think specifically the example when I was working with Virtual Catholic Conference, it was a very small team. And I was the guy that was building the websites and putting a lot of things together and ended up getting some help. But I remember I had this vow. And this vow was, I won't give them a reason, my partners, I won't give them a reason to think that I'm not carrying my own weight. And it was wrapped up really in this source of pride, very much, that kind of this, here it is, the golden child showing up, you know, indestructible, can accomplish all things and can carry any weight. And this vow, I will not let them ever think, like, I'm not going to give them a reason to think that I'm not carrying my own weight in this. Man, it was exhausting. I tell you what, it isolated me. I didn't ask for help for a very long time. And what I ended up doing was, while I didn't ask for their help, I also didn't ask for your help, but I just kind of started to presume that you would help. And
I was like, you kind of like put stuff actually on me.
It's like, actually, there's a whole other stuff over here in the relationship with the person that you actually made a vow to. And
interestingly enough,
it's kind of being neglected over here. I'm kind of feeling like a single parent right now. And it's like, oh man, you know, so it was, again, that pride there was was seeping over into other areas. And I talk to a lot of men that struggle with this here as well. There's this pride that comes for like this pride of provision, right? For the family, of this vow of like, my family is never going to know what it means to be without. Something like that. It's a vow. And where it can lead them down is a path of self-reliant, wedding themselves to their work, where they're just busting their hump, and they're spending time away from their family, but all this justification starts coming where it's just like, well, I'm bringing home the bacon, and this is what it means to be a provider, and meanwhile, there's a whole other aspect of what it means to be a father that's not being provided in that sort of that's a fruit of this vow,
right? Like you're not carrying your weight in a place where you took a vow.
Well, yeah, and you're also not, and this has been my journey here, folks, so I'm like still very kind of early on with this one, with the whole trusting in God's provision, and it being the both and relationship, where it's like, yes, do your work, don't be lazy, and trust that God's going to provide, and it's going to be enough. Like returning to that 5 loaves and 2 fish mentality, even where it's just like, there's no way that this is going to cover the bills, Lord.
Yep.
And he's just like, it's enough. It's enough. Yeah. It's enough. Like that's been a walk that I've been on right now. But yeah, it stems from this vow that I'm realizing, where it's just like, I'm not going to let my family know any sort of financial deprivation.
So it's like switched from that other vow to like this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is, it's the same rule that applies to this one, where it applied the last one, where it's like the very thing that you're trying to avoid, you start to create it.
Yep.
And so these vows, the second grouping, where it's like, they actually make me strong, it's more like they're pretending to be useful, right? But they're actually not. They're not useful at all, if anything.
And it's protecting a facade of strength.
That's it. And I think I want to make this distinction here, because we always talk about like our responsibility of will, like where do we will up to, and then where does the Lord come into that place, right? Mm-hmm. Because we don't say like, just sit back, like Catholicism is a passive exercise. It's not, we're called into being actively willful.
Yeah. Doing good.
And intentionally working with the Lord. And I think that's the answer. It's just like, are you doing it by yourself, or are you doing it with God?
Yeah, in relationship. There it is, the R word. It's back again.
Yep.
All right, so when we make our own vows, I think like Peter did, Christ has a similar response to us. I think this is a really important thing to just take to heart here. What do you say to Peter? If I don't wash your feet, you will have no part of me, right? That's like,
if you don't need me, you have no part of me.
Yeah, like if you're not going to enter into a relationship with me, then you're not going to experience just what it means to be in relationship with me, which is what you were meant to experience. Like you're not going to have any part.
Yeah,
and I love Peter's response, where he's just like, always over the top. Then wash everything, like but like, praise the Lord, like that's something that's a step in the right direction.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's the same counter strategy as the previous one, where you could instead just say, is this vow pretending to be useful?
Yeah.
And another question you can ask is am I coming closer to the Lord with this vow or not? Mm-hmm. And you're probably going to have the answer to that.
Yeah.
It's going to be pretty easy to answer that.
Or like, what is the weakness that I'm seeking to hide? What is the weakness that's there?
Or that I'm afraid of.
That I'm afraid of looking at, or I'm afraid of revealing.
Yeah.
Or I'm afraid of having associated with me.
Or I'm afraid of being exposed.
That. I mean, and that starts to get into even those exiled parts of us, right, that are being hidden here. So
really just our wounded parts. That's what you're saying. And those wounded parts, that's where the Lord wants to come into and really speak to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But definitely renounce these vows. Mm-hmm. Because I will tell you, there have been times where I've uncovered vows and I just renounced it and there was a release.
Oh, yeah.
I experienced a release.
That's not over spiritualizing, folks.
No.
Like that's not what we're saying here, is just like that's the antidote and check box. No, but there is a spiritual reality here where that can create some separation between you and and the enemy.
I
very
actually
much.
recommend you renounce it first, and then it does put space between you and it, so that you can actually do the thought work and actually reason through it.
So it's like renouncing the lie. I'm starting. Tell me what you think about this. I renounce lies, but I'm a little hesitant to renounce emotions.
Is that? I think we talked about that in another podcast.
Okay, yeah,
we
'cause I
talked
think-
about emotional triggers.
Yeah, it's like I don't because that starts to build an association, perhaps that,
Well,
like that emotion is bad.
I see what you're saying there. I mean, maybe it's because I don't think emotions are bad.
Okay.
But I do think that there are spirits that show themselves up that are actually like the spirit of anger and the spirit of, and so it doesn't hurt to renounce. This is what I always say. I'm like, it never hurts to renounce something or bind something. If you feel a release, okay, yeah, that is more of a diagnostic approach. Like you're like, oh, okay, so there may have been some kind of spiritual stronghold there.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you don't also take responsibility for the area where maybe you are continually falling into the habit of anger and thinking thoughts that are creating that anger.
Renouncing
so
is it's a step in the reason cycle. It's not
the only step.
The only step in the reason cycle. Okay, so we got to do all the steps in the reason cycle here. Okay, and we've got a whole course in our Academy Plus on the reason cycle. So if you're like, what's the reason cycle? Jump into Academy Plus and you can walk yourself through that. Okay, third and final lie that we've got here today, and I love this one. Is you can still thrive and have your vows. You don't have to deal with this. There's nothing going on behind the curtain. Right?
Can we define the terms here? Like, what does thriving mean?
Okay. So just what I would think it is like I can still accomplish all that God wants me to accomplish and become all that God desires me to be, which is like heaven, without dealing with these things. You know, and I think what we end up doing with that is we end up actually lowering the bar of thriving down to more of a coping.
Well, yeah,
or some sort of, you land at some place of mediocrity with this.
Yeah. Thriving isn't, and I want to make this distinction. Thriving is not avoiding pain. Yeah. It's not merely avoiding pain, right? That is more like coping or restoration or healing, or even just working your way out of the pain. But that is not thriving. It's not; those aren't the only two spectrums. There's like a wide spectrum of stuff in between.
It's like,
here.
Hey, I'm not yelling at my kids.
Yes,
I'm not cheating on my wife. I'm not looking at porn all the time. It's just like, okay, well,
here's
that's good.
Here's the interesting thing, though, because vows, that is the goal of vows, is avoiding pain, is avoiding weakness, avoiding pain.
Okay.
And so thriving is not the same thing as having vows. Thriving is living, like what you were saying, the abundant life amidst pain.
Tell me more about that.
So there is pain. We know it's going to happen, but also in the same sense, living the abundant life. And what do we mean by that? Living in relationship with the Lord, in a great relationship with the Lord, and allowing the Lord to help us to grow. Like that's what
amidst
the abundant
pain.
life.
Through the pain,
in the pain, all of it. We're not avoiding the pain, but it's like, I think it's Brene Brown that says the amount of emotion that you allow yourself to feel, like it kind of happens on both spectrums. So if you're like, I'm never going to feel negative emotions, which by the way is a vow, I'm never going to feel negative emotions. You're also never going to feel positive emotions. Like, so you're like numbing all of your emotions at the same time.
Yeah.
And I see that as the same sense as like thriving is actually living life fully.
Yeah.
Which is another way to call it like abundant life. But that's the pain and the glory, all of it.
Yeah. So I'm doing Exodus 90 right now, and one of the things that everything that you do in Exodus 90, these ascetic practices, it's all about reducing noise from your life and these sources of buffering that we call it. Buffering when you go to like an action to correct an emotion, which never really works. But all of a sudden, like your little blankies, they're removed, and then you're just sitting in this stillness. And what starts to come up in that stillness? And so this is kind of another way of doing a little bit of kind of self-assessment. If you're one of those people that just finds yourself being very frenetic and having to go from place to place to place, thing to thing to thing to thing, having your packed schedule all the time, Even if your packed schedule is going to Rosary and then going to Stations of the Cross and going to all these holy things, it looks very pious, but it's not actually bringing you to a place of real rest. You're buffering with spiritual things at that point. It's a real thing called spiritual gluttony, perhaps.
Yeah.
And you're not really creating that silence that is necessary to thrive, because it's in that place of silence where we actually hear the subtle movements that the Lord does in our heart. We actually enter into that interior castle, that relationship that's there, which is essential, absolutely essential to that thriving relationship. But if we just got the cacophony and the din kind of, those are good vocab words, going off all around us, we're not going to hear the Lord's voice. And it's that still, small voice. And that's essential to thriving. Otherwise, if you're not listening to that, you're going to be following the voice of the din, of the cacophony, of the Instagram channel. And everybody's got all kinds of thoughts about how you should be living your life. But they're arguably not the author of your life, nor the person that has, the best vantage point to tell you what that is.
Yeah.
We need to go interiorly, right?
So let's go back to this lie. You can thrive and still have your vows.
Okay.
So our vows are what we've uncovered. Our vows are pretending to be protective, pretending to be useful, pretending to be strong. And also what we've uncovered is when we live out of our vows, we create the very thing we're trying to avoid, and we're doing it in isolation, away from God, away from relationship. So to think that you can thrive, which is like live the abundant life, while holding on to these vows, like now that we've broken it down for you, I think it's kind of laughable to think like that the two could be held at the same time. Yeah,
I think everybody knows that love demands vulnerability, and if you're not willing to enter into that vulnerability, which is letting go of your vows, right, you're not going to experience the fullness of love. And folks, as we're sharing these things, it's not to shame, not to be like, I should be further along. Maybe some of these lies that the enemy uses, you've kind of diagnosed them in yourself, right? Yep. And now it's just like, what do I do with these things? Or I can't believe that I bought into these things, or I shouldn't be thinking these things. It's like, okay, there's the enemy getting at it again. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's an awareness that we're seeking here, folks. We grow aware of these things, and then we kind of say, okay, these are there. And then that's not where it stops. That's where it starts.
Yes.
And then it's like, okay, how do we take this through reason? How do I take this to the Lord? How do I use this? The enemy wants to use this to cause a divide. How do I use this to bridge a gap? How do I use this to enter into a deeper relationship with the Lord? That comes through prayer, but also it comes through like being in relationship with other people that can be sources of good counsel for you as well.
Yeah.
And not shame you for it, but just be like, hey, you know what? I get it. Feel safe.
And when we say taking it through reason, it's really just like holding it up next to the light of truth, who is God, who said, I am the truth, right? Like, so it's doing it in relationship with the Lord. It's not separate. It's not really even different when we're bringing a thought through reason. We're literally bringing it to the foot of the cross. We're bringing it to the foot of the throne, and we're going, Lord, what is your truth? Because this feels like a lie. This feels like it is not creating good fruits,
Yeah. So often, even in spiritual direction, I'll have directees that'll bring up things, and then they'll kind of say, yeah, but I shouldn't. I know I got to get back. I get past that. I shouldn't be judging. I shouldn't be doing that. And I'll say, hey, can we look at that? Can we kind of look at that a little bit? And that trailhead that we start going down, those lies, the vows that we start to, even like that, I shouldn't be doing this. I should never get angry. I'm not going to get angry again. Maybe you have somebody who's really struggling with anger, and all of a sudden it's like, I'm not ever going to show my anger again. It's like, let's just take.
Yeah, that's one of those vows.
Yeah, one of those. Yeah. Let's just take a look at this. And folks, it can become one, and it's hard to do that by yourself.
Yes.
Because it's hard to go into these places without this that are very condemning, without this counter experience of mercy simultaneously. And so this is where a good relationship with a good coach, good spiritual director, good therapist, good friend, good priest, good pastoral care worker, good spouse can really be the appropriate setting for this. But it's somebody that can give you that counter experience of mercy. We call that holding the space, suspending judgment, and just allowing you to be where you are in that moment, because that's where you are in that moment. Let's just not invent it. Let's not wish it away or phantasm it away. I think it's there. Mm-hmm. And then saying, okay, like it's here, it's out. The Lord is merciful. And then it's just like, okay, what is the Lord speaking to this? Like, what are you really seeking with this? Okay, I'm seeking this. I'm seeking safety. I'm seeking relationship here. Okay, that's a great desire. Can we affirm that's a great desire? Yeah, not going about it the right way, but it's a great desire. Awesome, beautiful. How can we take this to the one that can truly satisfy?
Yep.
Can we do that? Are you willing to do that? You don't have to. And it's just, there's something that happens there, folks, where it's just like all of a sudden prayer becomes real in these situations.
Yep. Yeah, no more sugar-coated prayers.
I know.
Sugar-coated fake prayers.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Jesus doesn't. No, I'm just kidding.
But that's what we got.
He probably does.
Yeah.
He lives outside of time and space.
He's got lots. Okay. Very good. All right. So, folks, that's kind of what we got today. Those are some of the things that keep you from even looking at those vows. I mean, again, those vows are those things that they seem protective, but they're not, right? They're a form of self-protection that says, hey, God, I got this. I'm going to guard myself. Isolates us from relationship with him, relationship with other people, and ultimately leaves us feeling prone to greater attack, right? In isolation.
Yeah. Or just literally creating the thing that we don't want to create. Like that's we become a pawn in the game.
Yeah. And we fail to actually experience the relationships that we were created to experience.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So
there's no abundant life in these vows. So
or by yourself.
Come join us. Join us in our academy where we'll help you kind of walk through this process, because Lord knows we are going through this too.
Yeah.
Every day, I'm probably uncovering a new vow. So
yeah, lots of beams in these eyes, but the Lord, praise God, has removed a good bit of them. Praise the Lord. But show up in the academy here. We're doing a lot of beam and splinter work. We're identifying some of these points of awareness in them so we can actually bring them to the Lord and have real freedom with that. And it's not healing for the sake of healing, but it's healing for the sake of becoming fully who we are in our unique design and our unique mission, which is like, that's meaningful here, folks.
Every time you say beam in our eyes, I always think of like laser beams coming out of, I don't know why. Either laser beams or big like 2x4s.
Sharks with laser beams.
You know.
Freaking laser beams on their heads.
Yeah. What's that from?
That's from Austin Powers.
Oh, Austin.
Well, they're ill-tempered. Anyways, join us in the academy, folks. That's all we got today. We'll see you there. See you next time.
Peace.
Hey, thanks for sticking with us in the Catholic Coaching Podcast. If you like what you heard,
please like and subscribe, and we'll see you again.